live, right? Tell me if you can hear me when you hop on. This is Jason. Well, my name's Jason, but I go by ESTEY'S Crime Maze. That's right. ESTEY'S. ESTEY'S. But you know that if you're already on my live. Welcome, everybody. I'm just a new channel. I've got, 68 or 70 subscribers. I've got several videos out, is all. And it's on the Idaho4 case, my friends. And I want to take this channel to a whole other level because I want to bring truth and awareness of what's really been going on in the Idaho4 case. And I want to do it with your help, everyone, because I know many of you are amazing crime sleuths out there. I know many of you may be just getting into this case, familiarizing yourself with this case. Some of you are also doing your due diligence, doing hardcore research, possibly for a year or two or more on the Idaho4 case. I've been digging in as well, everyone. And as I always say on my videos, the Idaho4 case, of course, is a super wild and crazy case. You will not find a wilder, crazier crime story, crime case than this one. True crime, baby. It's even more, way more wilder than the Delphi case. So anyway, even though I went a few minutes live today, by the way, late, hopping on the live here, I was supposed to go at 11 a.m. sharp. Hopefully this time I'll see some people on my chat page come up. Last time I had it set on a private setting by an accident, everyone. I didn't double check, but I'm pretty sure it's set publicly. So let's get into this Idaho4 case. And by the way, everyone, as part of this wild, crazy case, as I described, a lot of people say, of course, that it's tragic, right? It's super tragic because we're supposed to believe that there was a quadruple homicide in Moscow, Idaho, November 13th, 2022, right? That we're supposed to believe that 4 young, beautiful, healthy university students in the hours, say, between 2 and 4 a.m., we're supposed to believe through corporate media, through, at first, law enforcement there in Moscow, Idaho, FBI, local cops. We know the FBI took charge of this case. We're supposed to believe them, that they're telling us the truth, that it really happened, that all 4 were stabbed to death. When in fact, here's the thing, my friends, it's not as tragic as it's made out to be. I truly believe that, my friends, because these students were in fact extracted. I truly believe that, my friends. In my opinions, they were saved by the feds, rescued. Yes, they knew they were targeted, right? They absolutely, the feds were surveilling them that night, my friends. You can tell there's all kinds of circumstantial and direct evidence that the feds were monitoring those students. Why wouldn't they be? These students, my friends, obviously one or more students was most likely intimately involved with law enforcement, intimately involved in probably a crackdown, ultimately, of some criminal organizations, because this is one of the many eye-opening things that we're learning about this all-important case of the Idaho4, right, everyone, is that we're learning there were many criminal investigations, parallel investigations going on, or should I say at least 2 or 3, right? And we know there was major, again, deep undercover, often covert investigations going on in the criminal underworld, where the feds were trying to get the top fish of cartel members, for example, right? Trying to bust members of the Aryan family, for example, the Aryan Knights who were, trafficking drugs often, right? In these small towns. They used the university's infrastructure to sometimes traffic the drugs, often. We know many of the dorm rooms, if you look into this case, my friends, in other cases, they use the dorm rooms, unfortunately, for storing drugs, selling product. We know the FBI is in universities at times as well. I mean, it's one big incestuous pool. The FBI, they're trying to flip and create informants in the universities, monitoring. I mean, it just goes on and on and on. And we know, speaking of the drug investigations, right, everyone, a drug bust, there was a major drug bust, as everybody's talked about, just before the Idaho4 case. Then another massive drug bust at Washington State. Was that about a month or 2 afterwards? Feel free to leave me a comment, everyone. and I think it was at least 26 members, high members of, I believe the Aryan family, Aryan Knights, were busted, right? And then you've got a Sinaloa cartel leader apparently in Eugene, Oregon. I mean, the trafficking hubs, my friends, it's a real reality. But what really gets me is all these guilters, all these people that think the students were stabbed to death, many of them that especially think, for example, there's a lone assassin, that the cops got it right in the FBI. Brian Koberger's your man, right? Somehow he did this quadruple homicide, even though he has no motive. We'll talk more about that. But these same guilters, they never talk hardly at all about the drug hubs. They don't talk about the drug operations, right? They don't talk about how the FBI, CIA do their investigations at all. They don't talk about real history. Part of that real history, my friends, and we'll bring it all home later in this video, hopefully, is that, again, they will do what they call an extraction operation, in which if an informant, or more than one, if an informant's cover has been blown, a confidential informant, a valuable asset, especially when we're talking about the criminal underworld here, my friends, right? Think about it. If you're FBI, the feds, you're trying to, have informants break into these criminal investigations, break into these cartel members, right? And you ultimately want to do arrests. Well, obviously your informant many times is a very valuable asset, and they will go hard at trying to protect those valuable assets, my friends, these informants. Now, if the informant has had their cover blown, again, the feds will go hard to try to protect them, my friends, and they will do at times an extraction operation, a deep, covert extraction, and they will relocate them. It's called the WITSEC program. This is a real reality, my friends. And I think the Idaho4 case fits all the bells and whistles when you connect the dots, my friends. It really does. Let me give you an example. Don't tell me we're up. Is this a private setting again? I don't see anybody on my chat. This is crazy. But we're going to go on here, my friends. If it's on a private setting, I'm going to do a short video and apologize to all of you, because I know many of you that are new to my channel were expecting me to go live today. I don't know why it keeps doing this. Let me just read to you briefly, my friends, what a WITSEC program is. Obviously, it stands for, Witness Protection Security Program. Here it is. I just want to get it exactly right for you, everyone's. WITEC. And Birdie, by the way, on YouTube and TikTok, he did a great job breaking down and describing the WITSEC program. It's a witness security program. That's the acronym for WITSEC. Or you could say Witness Protection Program. It's a federal program in the United States. And here's the key point, my friends, excuse me. It protects witnesses who are at risk, as I said, due to involvement in criminal investigations or trials. Think the Brian Koberger trial taking place right now, right, my friends? And as I've always said, the arrest of Brian Koberger is a perfect distraction from these criminal investigations largely, but we'll get into that later. And by the way, everyone, with the WITSEC program, and the objective is, if they extract one or more people, they'll relocate them. And as I've been saying, I was guessing that Kaylee Gonzalez, Madison Mogen, Ethan Chapman, Xander Canoodle, they've been relocated most likely, I'm guessing, to Puerto Rico. Why do I say Puerto Rico? Puerto Rico, we know the United States, my friends, this is a fact. They have a WITSEC program in Puerto Rico. Probably because it's very secluded. Maybe even Costa Rica, for all I know. And we know that Gonzalez at least took a vacation in Costa Rica. I'm not sure about Puerto Rico, but and again, everyone, so if you have a high-risk asset, not only will they rescue them, as part of that rescue mission, my friends, you can Google drivers, associated with WITSEC programs, and it'll come up, it'll tell you that a high-risk asset, transportation security are often controlled by federal agents, not civilian drivers. So think DoorDash, think about Kaylee and Madison, my friends, at the grub truck. Remember, a car all of a sudden appears, and Kaylee, just before that, she kept texting. Who was she texting? I've had people on social media say that they think, some people that are really read up on this case and digging in, I think they're correct when they are speculating that she probably was texting a federal agent. Wouldn't that make sense, everyone? If this was an extraction operation, she's probably texting the federal agent about the driver, to pick them up. Very well could be, right? And I bet that driver was a federal agent. It would make sense. Why are you going to switch cars, go from a civilian driver, and then, how are you going to get the federal driver in there and change drivers? No, it'd probably be a Fed pickup, my friends. Undercover federal driver, I'm guessing. I don't think those girls even went back to the house. A lot of truthers have said that too. And I think that makes sense. It says in rare high-profile or cartel-related cases, a government vehicle and armed driver might be assigned temporarily. So again, everyone, and then, when they're relocated, like if I'm right, Kaylee Gonzalez, Xander Canuto, these beautiful, young, intelligent, vivacious students, as well as Xander Canuto. You have the intelligent, cool, handsome dude, Ethan Chapman, a great guy. All of the amazing people. If I'm right, my friends, again, they're relocated and they're going to live low profile lives, as I said before, once they're settled. And we'll do whole videos on this, my friends, but some of the things that you're never going to see, we the public, we're not going to see a digital trail from these people. We're never going to see them again, my friends. The family members, the parents will be lucky to see them again. And if they do, probably won't be too often. So I kind of feel for the parents. But we'll talk about Steve G, my friends, before this live's over, because I don't trust him. I think he's very shady in some aspects, and he's a Fed. And he's lying to the public, in my opinion, and it's disgusting. He shouldn't be lying. But anyway, that's just me there. So this is very important, my friends. And, I think there was a lot of collecting drug debts going on. Obviously a lot of payments. We can only surmise, everything that was going on in Moscow, Idaho, and those students, everyone. And I think those students, they were delivered threats, or the feds found out. Obviously, those students were under severe threat, my friends, harm. Their lives were in danger. And, the feds knew that on November 13th, apparently, they knew they had to extract them. And here's the other thing I find fascinating, everyone. A woman reminded me on social media, and I knew about it, but I forgot. Remember, it was a news interview, I'm sure, with Kaylee Gonzalez's mother. And feel free to leave me in the chat, everybody. I forget her name. She seems like a really cool woman all the way around. Beautiful woman, beautiful mom. I'm sure she's an exquisite mother. And I'm sure probably a great wife overall to Steve G. But anyway, the mother said openly, my friends, to the public, she said Kaylee, her daughter, photobombed her. That this is the day before the atrocity, photobombed her mother, meaning Kaylee, for whatever reason, gave all her photos, or most of them, to the mother. And probably other personal items as well. But it was in the context of photobombing her. And the woman on social media who reminded me of this said that she has two daughters, roughly the same age as Kaylee and Madison. And she says her daughters have never photobombed her. She thought it was very, very unusual. And I think it's more than just a coincidence, my friends. Again, when you look at this extraction operation theory and connect the dots. Hopefully you guys and gals agree, but if you disagree, again, feel free to leave me a comment if you agree or disagree. And by the way, everyone, before I forget, I hope you subscribe to my channel. I'm a new channel. My last live, again, I think I put some real powerful information out, hopefully on this case, digging in, and my video got blurry. Yeah, people were telling me, and I saw it too. Most of my video went blurry. Someone said that never happens. They don't see it on other people's channels. What the hell's going on? I sure as hell hope it's not CENSORSHIP. I'm just trying to dig in for the truth. I'm just a new channel. YouTube engineers and CIA out there, please don't censor ESTEY'S Crime Maze. Okay? So there you go, my friends. And I thank YouTube engineers and people who own YouTube for allowing me to use this platform. It's so important. And of course, we have other social media platforms. I'm on Facebook, everyone. You can check me out there at Jason Estey, E-S-T-E-Y, by the way. I got a video that I think had about 2,000 views almost in several days, which I was really happy about. But I want to grow this YouTube channel, my friends. So again, if you enjoy my videos, if you think I have value to share with humanity, as I like to say, please subscribe. Hope you smash that like button, okay? Hit that bell icon so you can be notified for future videos. This all apparently helps with the algorithms, helping get the videos out. And leave me a comment. That helps with algorithms as well. And I read your comments. I appreciate the engagement. Thank you for joining me today, again, on this all-important, fascinating, wild, crazy case of the Idaho 4. But again, my friends, it's not as near as tragic as corporate media and elements of the law enforcement, FBI, CIA, because the students are alive. I truly believe that, my friends. And you know, I got to give credit again to Birdie. Birdie is on TikTok and YouTube. Go follow him, everybody. And I'm hoping to interview him. Anybody who's listening to me today, and now, please, my friends, reach out to Birdie for me, would you? Maybe pump up my tires, tell him I'm articulate and intelligent and I'm digging in on the Idaho 4. Tell him that I'm a good conversationalist and that you think that maybe Birdie and I would probably have an epic interview together if he would allow me to interview him. I'd be honored and privileged. He has way more followers than me. I've got over 2,000 followers on TikTok. He's got way more, but yeah, he's been at this case for quite a while himself, you know, and he apparently has a new YouTube channel as well. So check him out, everyone. But I hope you'll reach out to him for me, perhaps some of you out there, okay? I really want to interview this guy because he was the first one to really connect a lot of these dots, everyone, of an extraction operation. In his mind, you can tell he leans towards this theory as being the real reality of this case. And I describe, my friends, this was a complete strategic, operational PSYOP. No question about it in my mind, my friends. I mean, just look. You've got corporate media that's telling you through, many people who think that the students were killed, they see the lies from corporate media. They rightly expose the lies, right? And from law enforcement at times on this case, but they don't look through the other lens that the students were never stabbed. Why would you even trust corporate media and law enforcement that they were stabbed unalived when there's no direct evidence? Can I repeat that again, my friends, that last sentence? There's no direct evidence that any of the students were unalived, stabbed at the early morning hours of 2 or 4 a.m., a quadruple homicide. And here's an example, my friends. There's no, I said this in the last video, right? There's no raw crime scene footage of that house, the inside of the house. And we know the crime scene got destroyed, by the way, which is disgusting. The university gave the okay, and law enforcement was okay with it, to destroy the house, the crime scene. Now you got what they call a dollhouse that's going to be represented in the trial, right? You know jurors are going to have wanted to go to that crime scene, right? Anyway, but what was I saying now, my friends? This was, again, a strategic operational PSYOP, and I'm going to keep defining to you, my friends, what a PSYOP is, because it's so important, okay? A PSYOP, as I've said many times, I'm going to keep telling you, it's and please, my friends, think of the Idaho 4 case. Think about corporate media and the narratives that have been put out, largely by, I believe, CIA-curated corporate media narratives. Think about some of the YouTubers at times that I believe are being used by the CIA. Okay, and some of these YouTubers are just sellouts, right? The ones that, especially that think Brian Kohlberger is killed, and other YouTubers I think are just being naive when they think the students have actually been unalived. But think about everything that's been said in this case, my friends, the lies, as I talk about what a PSYOP is. Okay, again, a PSYOP is any activity that's practiced mainly by psychological methods with the aim of elucidating or evoking a planned psychological reaction in another person. Another way of saying it is, and by the way, there's several different, there's many different terms for PSYOP. You have psychological operations, of course. There's hearts and minds. There's a few different terms. But but they all mean the same thing for PSYOP, right? So another way of saying it is, and this is very important, please listen carefully, my friends. It's when you take selected information and indicators to an audience to affect one's emotions, value systems at times, belief systems, right? To influence attitudes and behaviors. Think about what cops do often, especially when they're interrogating someone, right, everyone? But they'll also conduct these PSYOPs, okay? Again, to influence behaviors and attitudes also that are favorable to the originator's objective. Who's the originator's objective in this whole PSYOP of the Idaho4 case, my friends? It's huge elements of the FBI that took over this case, right? It's elements of some of the dirty cops, some good cops too, there in Moscow, Idaho. It's colluding with the local council officials. There's a huge conspiracy cover-up, my friends, and they have the same, largely the same incentive for doing this cover-up. You know, detractors from my theory will say, and detractors from Bertie's theory, they'll say, oh, it would have to involve 100 or more people. Yeah, it very well may, but there's a huge incentive, and law enforcement, you know, they have to protect each other generally, you know, the ones that know about this extraction operation, I believe. But there is a huge collusion. They have to cover this up, my friends, or they feel like they have to, because why did if I'm correct, why did the extraction operation happen? We'll discuss this more in future videos, everyone. Well, because again, an informant's cover was probably blown. So the feds, rightly so, they knew that either the Aryan family was after them, members, Aryan Knights, as Jay Embry strongly has suspected and connected the dots for you on his videos on YouTube. And please go to his channel. He's really good, my friends. Or it was literally cartel members that obviously targeted these students. It wasn't some lone assassin, Brian Koberg. You see, my friends, and we'll talk more about this, but obviously anybody who uses reason, logic, common sense, and is honest, you know that, and many people have said it, Brian Koberger, he couldn't have done this crime, and he didn't do this crime. He's used as a perfect distraction, I believe, my friends, right? CIA, FBI, they needed a lone wolf to be the distraction, to make you think, oh, somehow he did this quadruple homicide. We're not going to look over here at the actual PSYOP, the real event that took place. We're not going to have you look at all these drug cartels, drug running. We don't want you to look at the fact that Xana's stepmother, Karen, I always forget her name, Karen Norlington, I believe, and her husband, they were dealing hardcore drugs, right? They look like they, through the court docs, as Jay Embry shows you, they made deal after deal. They got released early, or the law enforcement made deals with them, right? They were probably informants. They probably snitched on cartel members, whether it be Aryan family, Aryan Knights. This is reason, logic, common sense, everyone. There's all kinds of reasons why those students were targeted in some way by very dangerous, evil people, my friends. Because again, if Xana's stepmother and her husband were informants, snitches, then again, this is real facts, my friends. We know that members like Aryan family, Aryan Knights, and even probably some of the cartels out there, they tell you it's basically their motto that if they can get to a snitch, they'll brutalize and sometimes kill snitches, or often, right? But if they can't get to the snitch, they basically tell you they're going to go after their family members. That's what they do for intimidation. I know it's pure evil, my friends, but this is what happens, right? So this would have been epic retribution if one or more of those students were somehow involved in this criminal investigation, either knowingly or unknowingly, and if they were pissing off these gang members, you know, again, especially if the gang members or the cartels suspected or knew that these, you know, students were acting like an informant, or the parents were, and, you know, obviously putting them at some of these gang members, cartels in danger of being busted, then obviously, my friends, again, their motto is to get epic retribution, as I described, right? And that's so, but here's the thing, my friends, again, the good news is, I think the feds did their job, my friends. I think it's clear as day. They did it very covertly, though. It's very compartmentalized the secrecy. It's basically, I describe unacknowledged special access projects or programs going on. And I know this kind of secrecy, everyone. I know how compartmentalized it can be because I study the aerospace companies UFOs, black budget technology within the military industrial complex. I just might have a defense contractor friend or two, as I like to say. I'm not going to go there, but this is very, very compartmentalized. But there are some cops, like Chief Fry, who was, one of the lead police investigators there in Moscow, Idaho. He knows what happened, my friends. He knows, in my opinion, this was an extraction operation. He knows the good news that the students were rescued. The feds were all over them, man. They didn't allow the cartel members and or Aryan family members to get to the students. They did their job. That's why the feds never have to be mad at me, or the FBI or CIA, who probably don't listen to my videos. But if they do, they know I'm giving them credit. More of us should realize this, my friends. The feds rescued those students. They've been relocated, man. They're going to live beautiful lifestyles, hopefully, low profile. But this is where I go back to Steve G for a few minutes, everyone. Steve G, the father of Kaylee Gonzalez. As Bertie tells you, my friends, and Bertie sort of laughed about this, and others have said it. Steve G, he totally looks like a federal agent. Doesn't mean he's a federal agent, but you know what does? In my opinion, his behaviors, my friends. I'm going to read off some of the behaviors that Bertie talked about of Steve G. You ready for this? Let's see if I can find it here, my friends, because I think it's really important. The feds needed, I think it's clear day, my friends, the FBI, CIA, they needed Steve G to do what he's doing, putting out the narrative, claiming that his daughter got stabbed unalived, right? Remember, video after video, interview after interview, he would say they didn't have to go to the third floor. I think it was the second or the third floor he was describing, right? I think the third, right? The top floor where his daughter was, for example, in Madison. They didn't have to go there. They didn't have to go there. It's all horse shit, my friends. He knows, in my opinion, the girls didn't even make it back to the house that night. They were picked up, almost certainly, and they certainly, in my opinion, were rescued, regardless, by the feds. He knows it, my friends, and he's receiving, this is why I get so amped up. Steve G's receiving all this money. Even if you think that the students were unalived and his daughter, many people, I think, have rightly said they're disgusted that Steve G is receiving all this money, and he's asking for money, I believe, from the public. What? He's got over $100,000 probably from the public, from the back of his daughter's death. Think about that. If you believe his daughter's dead, unalived. It's disgusting. It's abhorrent. I totally agree. But if she's alive, it's even more abhorrent, isn't it, my friends? I mean, because this money, where do you think the money's going? As one YouTuber said, it's going towards their new lifestyle, the families, Kaylee, Madison, probably Ethan Chapman, but they're not being honest with you. See, they're getting the money and they're lying to you, my friends. A lot of you are naively having the wool pulled over your eyes, thinking, oh, the students are unalived. And then you had the funeral ceremony. Before we get into Steve G here, if I can find it, everyone, just a sec. I'm going to let the dog in. One sec, my friends. Come on. Thank you. Thank you so much for your patience there, everyone. Now, where were we? Oh, I was talking about Steve G. Oh, I hate when I lose my train of thought like this, my friends. I kind of thought I was on a roll for a few minutes. Again, nobody's on my chat page. Is YouTube putting this on a private setting again for some reason? I thought I put it for public, man. What the hell's going on? Yeah, everyone, they needed Steve G, the FBI, CIA, to put out this narrative, I believe, that, again, Kaylee had different wounds, right? It's all nonsense, in my opinion, my friends. He's part of the PSYOP, psychological operations. He's a Fed. He knows how to do this. He's trained to do this. He's getting debris by the FBI. He probably signed a non-disclosure, again, my opinions, but I think the facts back it up, that he's allowed to release certain details. And let me just go over what Bertie wrote on Steve G, my friends. It was really cool, or really, I think, true and accurate here, what's going on with Steve G a little bit. And then hopefully, my friends, I wish you were on my chat page to remind me to talk a little bit about Brian Kohberger, the man that they arrested, and who really Brian Kohberger is. I'll try to remember. There's so much information to go through, obviously, my friends. This is why hopefully one day I'll have slides up on my lives and or other videos on this on YouTube, my friends. We'll have real presentations, okay? Let me just see here. Where's Steve G? Let's find it here. Oh, here we go. So, look at Steve G, my friend. First of all, he has controlled grief patterns. Some of you may be wondering, saying to yourself, what the hell are you talking about, Jason? Steve G controlled grief patterns. Well, Birdie went on to say, for example, he had written, he was emotional when it fit the media arc, then calculated when pushing the narrative. You've seen that, right, everyone? Steve G, does he shed tears? Does he break down emotionally? You would think he would, especially when he's describing his beautiful, vivacious daughter and her wounds and the fact that she was unalived, and he's doing all these media interviews. The guy doesn't even break down. Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? I think it's because he knows, my friends, in part, she's alive and healthy and well. Anyway, it goes, he called out law enforcement failures early, but he never went too far. He never blew the operation wide open. This is Steve G, everyone. So true. Like he was told to push, but within limits. That's exactly what Steve G does, my friends, right? You only go so far. Total Fed, again, in my opinion, everyone. And his whole extensive IT background that lends credence to the theory that he's a Fed or working for the Feds, my friends. Steve G, okay? And by the way, everything I'm telling you about the Idaho4 largely, like with the criminal investigations, right? We know the drug busts that have happened and ongoing criminal drug investigations, especially in these small towns, particularly Moscow, Idaho, Washington State. This isn't something that just happens over a year or two, right? If you're going to, especially to try to get these big fish of cartel members and bring them down, right? This is often like a 3, 4, 5 year operation. As Birdie said, I agree with him. The window of these drug busts and ultimately the Idaho4 unfortunate quadruple homicide was between 2020 and 2025 with all these deep covert drug investigations, okay? Just wanted to get that out there. Steve G, also, my friends, here are some red flags. Advanced media maneuvering. He was booked on national networks within days, right, of the so-called atrocity. No gotcha moments, no breakdowns. As I said, the guy never cries, as far as I could tell. Certainly does, and it's perfectly composed when speaking on Kaylee's injuries, for example, right, everyone? I mean, these are huge red flags, don't you think, everyone? Oh, here's another one. Yeah, and why are they feds? So you got a federal placement program that exists. The FBI routinely embeds, oh, sorry, I want to get back to Steve G. One sec here. Yeah, oh, the fact that, sorry, I paused there, everyone. Just the fact that Steve G's on all these national network interviews and putting out all this information that he does, and sometimes he repeats it, obviously, but the fact that he's getting all these millions, probably millions of views at this point, my friends, as the great Dr. Shiva says, again, Dr. Shiva is a buddy of mine. He's an amazing leader and educator. He's very famous. He's a biological systems engineer scientist, everyone. He's trying to start a global bottoms-up movement for truth, freedom, health. I bring him up and he's got a PhD from MIT, 4 degrees, invented the email system at 14 years old, lives in Massachusetts, United States. He tells you, my friends, over and over again, that anybody who gets major mainstream media play, whether good or bad, they are part of the swarm. In other words, part of the deep state, my friends, willingly or unwillingly. And so Steve G, just the fact that he's on corporate media so much the way he is, everyone, you got to know that he's working on some levels with the feds, the FBI, in my opinion, the CIA, my friends, for their curated narrative. You can't trust half of what Steve G tells you, my friends, including, I believe, the so-called unalivings of his daughter and the rest of the students. And then yet you have 2 surviving roommates. What I'm about to tell you, my friends, I think this really helps to bring it home. Actually, I'm going to tell you 2 aspects that I believe shows you these students were rescued by the feds. They were not unalived by cartel members, even though they were targeted. Obviously, somebody wanted them. The feds knew that their lives were in peril, I believe. But here's the thing, my friends, think about it. And everybody's been, all these guilters, they have no way to explain this. Why did you have 2 roommates that supposedly, survived the atrocity? Why did Dylan Morris and Bethany Funk, why and how did they survive? They were in the house at 1122 King Road that night, my friends. They're friends, at least with of course, Kaylee Gonzalez, Madison Mogan, Ethan Chapman, Xander Canuto, the 4 that we're supposed to believe were unalive. You had 2 surviving roommates. Again, Bethany Funk, Dylan Morrison. Why? Why did they get to survive, everyone? And the story goes that even Dylan, she claims at least, that she saw the assailant. She saw the bushy eyebrows, and he had a mask on. I mean, it's crazy. But why did the Brian Koberger or anybody who was supposedly responsible for atrocity, and if he's 3 feet away from her, why would he let her survive? Does that make any sense? Does that make any sense? No, of course not. But guilters, they, for a year or 2, God knows how long, they've been trying to come up with maybe some sort of excuse why they were spared, right? They'll say, oh, well, Brian Koberger, his knife must have been destroyed, broken. Or he was did you hear this one, my friends? He was too tired. The killer must have been too exhausted to take out Dylan Bethany. What a bunch of horseshit, right? And also guilters will go on, and you get Brian, what's his name? Chris McDonough, ex-cop, right? He was involved in 300 investigations. I'm sure overall he was probably a good investigator, homicide investigator for law enforcement back in the day. But he's got a YouTube channel. I think it's called The Interview Room, I believe, right? And he has this famous psychologist on. He'll have also Karen Ramsland, I believe, she's actually supposed to have been Brian Koberger's professor, right? This famous Karen Ramsland, this famous forensic psychologist. They'll come on Chris McDonough's show, and they'll try to come up with some reasoning why an assailant like a Brian Koberger would kill, unalive 4 students. And they have, of course, they can't come up with a legitimate excuse, again, why though Dylan and Bethany would be left alive. And their reasoning for somebody like Brian Koberger to do a quadruple homicide, it makes no sense. But they'll try to say, well, he was a one-off Ted Bundy. All these guilters will say that too, right, everyone? Just because the only thing that Brian, as I always said, had in common with Ted Bundy was they were both supposedly taking PhD in criminology. Or were supposedly Brian Koberger went to WSU and, was doing these courses. Well, by the way, everyone, there's no evidence really that Brian Koberger went to WSU. Circumstantially, there might be, but I don't even think he necessarily went to WSU. If he did, he didn't go there very long, we know, because one day I will play you from mainstream media, I'll play you one of the reporters talking about, they did their investigation on this, and they claimed that Brian Koberger was just a first semester student, right? Taking his PhD in criminology or something. So, but then people tried to substantiate that at the time, and they couldn't even find that Brian Koberger actually went as a student, I don't think. But the bottom line is, my friends, we know that Brian Koberger, he was intimately involved with law enforcement. Remember? He got interviewed. He wanted to become a cop. This is all the perfect cover story, my friends, for Brian Koberger. It really is, in my opinion, everyone. And as I said in my previous videos, the deep state will often do this. They'll use people at times that have these high academic positions, whether it be professors at Harvard, etc. And they'll use them for curated narratives, for disinformation at times and lies. Okay, that's how it works. Brian Kohlberger, he's a government plant all the way around. We could talk for hours on Brian Kohlberger. For all of you, whoa, my sister just ran over something with her vehicle outside here on the farm. But excuse me, everyone. People that say that Brian Kohlberger is innocent of these crimes like Jay Embry and thousands of other people, yes, you're correct. He didn't do any atrocity, especially at 1122 King Road. And there wasn't an atrocity that was committed, in my opinion, to everyone. But Brian Kohlberger, what they don't, some of them fail to realize, he's obviously an FBI plant, my friends. Remember, this thing was organized, the PSYOP, for years, in my opinion, everyone, right? So they groomed Brian Kohlberger. They positioned this guy. Trust me, my friends. And yes, they will use people that have a drug habit, right? We all have certain flaws in our personality. Don't think for a minute that the FBI are not sophisticated enough and CIA to deliberately use people at times that have a drug habit. They're easily more controlled. And then, and I've seen this from my own experience with controlled opposition, even during COVID mandates, everyone. If they'll use people that, again, that are on drugs at times, and if those people say that if they get too unstable, if they're doing way too many drugs and they can't carry off the agendas from the FBI, you know, the script, for example, then what the deep state will do, they'll pull them back into the fray and you won't hear about them. They'll go quiet, these people, whether it be a Brian Kohlberger, etc. Brian Kohlberger, my friends, I will always be convinced. It took me a while to really nail this down. But like a lot of people that they agree with me, they'll say they know that he's a plant. You can see it, everyone. He's like a crisis actor, my friends. He's used for the distraction, the PSYOP. Can't you see it, everyone, right? If this was an extraction operation, it makes sense that the FBI groomed a Brian Kohlberger. And remember, all part of the convenient narrative, my friends, right? We're supposed to believe that the FBI, law enforcement, they discovered touch DNA on a knife sheath. I don't want to sound too morbid, but if you believe the atrocity happened, the knife sheath, they say, was supposed to be under Madison Mogen's leg or beside her. And somehow, with this amazing technology, which it is largely the IgG, when used properly, you know, the DNA, it's amazing what we can do with DNA technology, my friend. But they're trying to con you to make you believe they found touch DNA of Brian Kohlberger, right? And we know the FBI, they didn't even show their work on how they got to Brian Kohlberger, right? They, as I said in my last video, Ann Taylor, the defense team, she even had to bring up in front of the judge in the world that when the FBI got the DNA from Othram Labs, from my understanding, they doubled the SNP size, which shows you undoubtedly they manipulate the DNA if they doubled the SNP size. And then the FBI did, again, they didn't even show their work, my friends. And then they illegally went to sites to get DNA, apparently, or to get Brian Kohlberger's DNA or something. Again, these are reasons why this case is so important, my friends. We know through even the last decade, as I said in one of my videos, some of these false flag operations, whether it be 9/11, which was obviously a much bigger operational PSYOP, conducted by most likely Mossad, as many people have said, but many other false flags like 9/11, many others, my friends, it's conducted by elements of FBI, CIA at times to try to override people's rights, right? That, you know, sometimes these FBI, CIA, etc., the deep state, they will do things illegally and obtaining information, and then they'll try to, you know, go through loopholes within the justice system to try to make it legal. Just like I believe this DNA, if we're not careful, everyone. We don't want them to be able to serendipitously, I'm not using the right word, but we don't want them to be able to get DNA just, you know, willy-nilly and set up innocent people in particular, my friends. We got to be very careful here and be hyper-vigilant, right? Protect our human rights and fundamental freedoms. And Idaho4 case, I think, is another example where, my friends, elements of the deep state very well may be trying to set precedent with this case, ultimately to try to override rights of U.S. citizens there, okay? And Bertie sort of alluded to this as well. So I know I'm putting out a lot of information today, everyone. Eventually, I want to get slides up and we'll do a professional presentation, so to speak, on a lot of the red flags, I believe, of the case, and what really points towards, I believe, a lot of evidence that points towards this most likely was an extraction operation by the feds. Again, I'll keep repeating, the students are alive, they're well, they're relocated. This was not an atrocity. Don't believe corporate media, my friends. You can't believe corporate media. You can't believe law enforcement, particularly in this case, with a quadruple homicide and with all the drug investigations going on. My friends, please keep an open mind. Look through another lens. Don't put your blinders on to guess, again, believing that from lamestream media and the FBI that Brian Kohlberger is somehow the assailant with his touch DNA. It's all nonsense. It's the PSYOP, my friends. It's the convenient narrative. And part of that convenient narrative, this is why I get so amped up, everyone. The guy's from out of state. He didn't even go to the University of Washington. You think that's just a coincidence? As I said over and over again, my friends, just look at it, the university establishment. Follow the money, baby. The university establishment, my friends, in my opinion, with FBI and the local, some of the local, city councils in there, Moscow, Idaho, my friends, they don't want you to know. They don't want the parents to suspect or know that there was a gang hit put out on the students, that they were targeted and that they had to be extracted by the feds. They don't want you to know any of this, my friends, because if that happened, 90% probably the parents, as we know, would not allow their kids, their young adolescent university students, to go back. This is reason, logic, common sense, and rightly so, right? Because of the danger. So that's why I think also is another impetus for this huge, huge cover-up, my friends. You can agree to disagree, but I truly believe that, right? What else did I want to say about following the money there on the university establishment? Oh, by the way, another huge red flag in this case, everyone, is, and I believe points towards an extraction operation eventually, is that the crime scene was destroyed. Is this part of a cover-up, everyone? When have you seen the crime scene, particularly a house when you have a quadruple homicide and it gets destroyed? You don't even allow jurors to see the crime scene? If supposedly 4 people are unalived, obviously you would want to allow jurors to see how the sounds are, because Dylan is claiming she's hearing different sounds, right? And by the way, speaking of sounds, everyone, and one other thing before I forget, my friends, the house was sold to or given away to the university. So again, it shows you the university establishment, I believe, is in on this cover-up, right, everyone? Has to be. And again, when you're involved in, whenever you have an extraction operation, often the property will be sold to shadow buyers, okay? But in this case, it wasn't sold to a shadow buyer. You had someone that owned the rental property of 1122 King Road. They owned the house and rented it out to the students, obviously. But ultimately, the university and law enforcement gave the okay to destroy the crime scene. And the again, the property was given to the university or something, then they destroyed it. So there you go. But speaking of what Dylan Morrison claimed she heard that night, this goes towards the feds going into the house for the extraction of the students, everyone. Remember, Dylan said she heard, and I think Dylan was probably being truthful here, she said she heard someone say, "I'm here to help you." Think about that, everyone. Think about that. Does that point towards Brian Kohlberger, this crazy lone assailant? Do you think that an assailant that's trying to do a quadruple homicide, why is he going to say, I'm here to help you? But he's trying to confuse students in the midst of all this chaos? No, my friends. It more or less points towards a Fed, I believe, doesn't it, going into the house to literally try to help one or more of the students that are in the house, let alone all 4, and they're saying, "I'm here to help you." And this is where I think Jay Embry gets it wrong, and so many others, my friends. Jay Embry does amazing work. But in my opinion, it doesn't seem like Jay Embry has ever looked at the extraction operation theory. And I would love to interview this guy. And if Jay Embry ever listens to my video, I'd say, Jay, I understand why you think the students were actually unalived, and you're right on about them being targeted, probably elements of the Aryan family, Aryan Knights, cartels, what have you. But they weren't unalived. They've been rescued. This was an extraction operation by the feds. And here's the other thing, everyone, and rightly so. I understand why Jambry thinks this, but he was the first one to, when you saw this huge operation out front of the house, you had cars, you had somebody sitting in a car for 3 or 4 hours just before the atrocity happened, right? You had a guy pacing back and forth on a cell phone talking to somebody, right? And then Jay Embry also was the first one, though, to discover the sound of a gun slider being cocked just before those students were supposedly unalived that night. Now, Jay, obviously, he thinks it was one of the assailants. But I would argue, my friends, no. It wasn't the assailant. It was the feds. And you can know it in part because it's standard operating procedure for feds to have their gun ready to go and cocked, even to go inside to rescue those students, my friends. That was a fed. The person at the dumpster, right? That again, Jay Embry and others think that is the assailants. No, that's part of the PSYOP, my friends. There were feds all over the place. But here's where it's a little confusing. Yes, there also was one gang member, I believe, out front just before the atrocities happened, because we know one of Xana's neighbors, a woman, Bubbly Waters on YouTube was the first one to discover this. Remember, she shouted out, I see you, Farley. And Farley, as Jay Embry shows you and others, he's one of the gangbangers for the Aryan family, Aryan Knights, my friends. So, yeah, you better believe that night, it seems like that the Aryan family, members of them, were after those students. They wanted a way to kill them, unfortunately, for this epic retribution. Again, probably because of Xana's stepmother and or the father being snitches on them, okay? But just because Farley was out front, my friends, I still don't think means that any gang members actually got to those students that night. They didn't get in the house because the feds were all over it, my friends. The feds were there in real time. They knew what was going on. They knew that probably Farley, the gang member, was out front, eyeing the neighborhood, seeing if they could do this atrocity. Do an atrocity, but I think the feds rescued them, my friends. Again, I give credit where credit's due. I think they absolutely were able to extract them in the cover of night. And say to everyone, as part of this strategic operational PSYOP, remember, I said there's no direct evidence for these unalivings. There was no open casket ceremony. We'll talk more about that in future videos. Everybody was cremated except for Ethan Chapman, where apparently the parents, they claimed they had a private funeral ceremony, which is very touching for Ethan Chapman. But I believe, again, everyone, reason, logic, common sense, that's part of the cover story. And we know that when you have an extraction operation event, which involves one or more people, you will never, ever see an open casket ceremony. That's a fact, my friends. It doesn't happen. And it didn't happen in this case either. Think about that, everyone, okay? What was I going to say about more about the extraction operation, everyone, that I believe took place? Something else. There's so much to talk about here, everyone. This is why those of you that ultimately watch this video, and I'm sorry that it must be under a private setting, somehow YouTube must have did it or something. Nobody's on my chat today, but when you see and hear this video, everyone, please reach out to Birdie for me, okay? Maybe share one or more of my videos or something. Tell him that I'm asking to interview him, please. Maybe pump up my tires again, okay? And for those of you that watch this video, again, I hope you subscribe, smash like the button. I hope I'm not getting throttled. I need your help, please, to get these videos out, everyone. I want to grow this channel somewhat, at least, okay? Again, I go by ESTEY'S Crime Mace. Thank you for being here, everyone. Thank you for watching, listening to me. And those of you, by the way, I'm looking to do lives with other like-minded Idaho4 junkies, or even those of you that may have an opposite viewpoint. If you think that my theory is outrageous, and or you just think that, no, it's more likely that the students were unalived, that we're not being lied to about that. No, they were taken out. If you think that, I challenge you respectfully, everyone, come on my lives. Let's do some lives together. You can talk about your evidence, your theory, and I'll talk about mine. And we'll let the audience decide who's right and who's wrong. Anyone else? Anyone interested in doing lives with ESTEY'S Crime Maze? Jason here? I hope so. We could do it on YouTube. We could do it on Facebook. Wherever you feel better. Okay? Let's do it. Oh, and by the way, I've had so many people call me all kinds of names, and so many people will say, especially on Facebook, they say, "Oh, you're so disrespectful to the families to say that the students are alive." I don't think so. Again, this is what I believe is the truth, everyone, and regardless, it should be embraced, shouldn't it be, everyone? That I'm saying the students are alive. This is good news. They've been relocated again under the Witness Protection Program. And I'm not the only one that subscribes to this theory, everyone. And when you dig in, again, when you study a little bit of the CIA, FBI, and these drug operations, and the compartmentalized, unacknowledged special access programs of, say, a deep extraction operation event, that the Moscow Idaho4, I think, fits the bill, everyone. And I'll try to connect those dots again on a live with one of you out there, some of you, if you're willing to do it with me, okay? Thanks for listening to that, everyone. Finally, I just want to end this live perhaps by saying this, everyone. Even though I believe there's no direct evidence, again, to point towards these students even being unalive, we're just being told this over and over again, regurgitated through corporate media, right? FBI, law enforcement. There is one evidence that they tried to, and they had me confused. I bought into it too for the longest time in this case, everyone, and then I figured it out. But remember, they had to have at least one visual to give to you that this atrocity happened. And what was it? And I don't want to sound too morbid, it was the red on the foundation of the house, right? We're supposed to believe that some of the students' blood, that it was such a bloody crime scene, it seeped out of the foundation of the house. That's quite the visual, isn't it, everyone? Very, very effective thinking, and it got me. I believed, it must be a bloody crime scene. Unbelievable, right? But no, my friends, I'm convinced, in my mind, that was part of the PSYOP. And believe me, everyone, under the cover of darkness, law enforcement using forensic people or what have you, other law enforcement, they could easily put pig's blood or paint on the foundation of the house, my friends. Is part of the PSYOP. I truly believe that. There was no atrocity at 1122 King Road that night, my friends, November 13th. And that's the good news. Again, they were rescued. I think it is, I guess you could say it's possible that Ethan Chapman, Xander Canoodle, unfortunately could have been victims. But I will always believe, especially Xander Canoodle, especially Kaylee Gonzalez and Madison Mogan, they definitely, in my mind, were saved, were extracted. For example, I don't believe they even got back home the night from the grub truck. I think Kaylee most likely knew that night they were going to be taken safely, extracted, put in a hotel, eventually, what have you. And by the way, everyone, you don't have to take my word for it. Again, backing up the extraction operation theory, everyone, that would be why you didn't have a 911 call for 8 hours. 8 hours, right, everyone? The feds probably told Dylan Mortis and Bethany Funk, don't you call 911. We got to get these students out of here. They would have given them a protocol that night or beforehand. Don't you call 911. Here's what's going to happen. And that's exactly what we saw, everyone. When have you seen a quadruple homicide and 911 call has not happened for 8 hours? And then Dylan claims that, she was so drunk and, I guess they didn't behave like they should have or something. It's just ridiculous, everyone. No, it points towards the extraction operation theory, reason, logic, common sense, doesn't it, everyone? And then to top it off, the 911 call, and maybe one day I'll play it for you guys and gals. Many YouTubers have, right? Most of them on this case. The 911 call, most people say they can tell it's contrived. Even people that are experts in, in voice analysis, they'll tell you it was fake crying most likely from the girls. And here's the big red flag, my friends. I think we should really question this. I think it was Dylan Mortison on the 911 call, or she had some of her friends on the call as well. None of them even mentioned blood. You would think that if it was such a bloody crime scene, why wouldn't they be saying on 911, oh my God, I see so much blood, it smells. I mean, right? There was none of that. Why? I'm guessing probably because even though the feds were probably there and they were trying to script, you know, how to react on the phone, either Dylan Morrison screwed up and didn't, you know, say blood, or the feds didn't script her to say blood because they knew that if she went on and on about the blood, it would sound even more contrived. I'm not quite sure, but just the fact that they at the house said that they saw blood and lots of blood, that shows you, in my opinion, that again, there wasn't an atrocity, my friends. These are just more red flags, right? Anyway, I hope I've made sense, everyone. I apologize if I hopped around too much on this live for some of you out there, but I think I was just trying to convey as much information sort of as I could in the short amount of time with you, although it's been about an hour. So thank you so much for listening, everyone. Again, we could talk for many more hours on this case. I'm sure many of you can as well and listen, but we'll do more videos hopefully on the Idaho4, God willing, everyone, okay? And again, unfortunately, we can't trust Steve G. I will give him credit. He had a great relationship, it looks like, with the one daughter, Kaylee Gonzalez. He probably has, hopefully, another good relationship with the daughter that's living at the house right now. I did hear, does he have 3 daughters, by the way? I heard the one daughter doesn't want any father, which is, if that's true, it's unfortunate. But Steve G, I feel for him in the fact that he's rarely, if ever, going to see Kaylee Gonzalez. He probably will see her once in a while, but at the same time, my friends, I think it's disgusting that he's putting out all these lies to the public. He's trying to hoodwink you, I believe, and in my opinions, he's receiving all this money from the public, and yet he knows his daughter was rescued by the feds and has been relocated under a WITSIC program. I think that's a fact, or it's my opinion, but the facts back it up. Let's put it that way. Steve G can't be trusted, my friends. I think, he looks like a Fed, as Bertie says, and he acts like a Fed. The extensive IT background lends credence that he's probably working for the feds, my friends, okay? And his behaviors. Again, my friends, this is a huge strategic operational PSYOP by and large, this Idaho4 case. I defined to you today what a PSYOP is. We'll do it again in future videos because I think it's vital to understand, my friends. Once you understand what a PSYOP is from law enforcement, and we know the military often does PSYOPs as well, once you understand that, then I think a lot of you that think Brian Colbert is guilty or the students were unalive, I think you could start to understand, look through a different lens, that yes, this most likely was a PSYOP conducted by law enforcement, very sophisticated one. Don't underestimate how sophisticated sometimes the feds can be, my friends, the deep state. Again, the intel agencies, CIA, FBI. Okay, I think they proved in this case. At times they're very sophisticated, but they also make mistakes, right? They make mistakes. Just like that 911 call, I believe, right? I think it was either a mistake directly from Dylan and or FBI where there was no blood spoken about on a 911 call in a quadruple homicide where all 4 students are supposedly stabbed to death, and they're not just blurting out that they see blood. That tells you, everyone, I think that it never happened. There was no stabbing. But yes, the students were being targeted at that time. And they were probably being targeted for months, at least one of them. So again, thank you so much for listening, everyone. Again, one more time, hope you subscribe if you enjoy my videos. I hope you smash that like button. I hope you hit the bell icon. You get being notified for future videos. I'll try to fix this chat page, everybody. When I publish and go live, or when I publish this video, this live, I'll see if it was set on a private setting. If it was set on private, that's why I didn't see anybody coming on my live today. Or maybe it's just because I'm a new channel. I'm not sure. I see it says 1, as if one person's on. Oh, I see 2 thumbs up, but I don't see any comments. What? On my TikTok, I get hundreds of comments at times, almost. Lots of comments. Where are the comments on YouTube here, folks? I don't know how this works, but we're gonna keep trying at times on YouTube, everyone. Again, you could check me on Facebook as well. Hopefully, I'll link that in the description. One of my accounts there is Jason Estey, E-S-T-E-Y. I got a picture of my sister on there. What else do I have? I'm on TikTok at Jason Truth Authority. Hopefully, I'll link that in the description as well. You can find me, Jason Truth Authority, everyone. I got over 2,000 followers over there. Again, I hope some of you amazing Idaho4 true crime junkies, true patriots out there fighting for human rights and fundamental freedoms and the truth on the Idaho4 case, I hope you might reach out to Birdie for me. He's on YouTube and TikTok. He's a great guy, apparently. Please tell him that I'd like to interview him. I'd be honored. I'd be privileged. And I think we could knock it out of the park, him and I. Okay? I'd really like to, either on TikTok or YouTube, whatever platform he prefers. As long as I can figure out this technology. I might need some help. Anyway, thank you so much for listening. And I'm looking to do a live with some of you out there. If you want to do a live on the Idaho 4 case, whether you agree or disagree with my theories, let's do it. Okay? And we can have some fun. Thanks, everyone. Again, if you think I've got to share with humanity, I hope also you'll share my video as well, subscribe and do all that good stuff. Let's get these videos out there. Let's get the truth out. And when I speculate, I try to tell you that it's speculation, but often I think the facts back it up. Let's connect those dots. It was an extraction operation. Students are relocated most likely. They are alive and well, particularly Kaylee Gonzalez, Madison Mogan. And hopefully, I think Xander Kernoodle and Ethan Chapman most likely were rescued by the feds too. Certainly, a lot of the narrative of this atrocity is just that, my friends. It's a story. It's part of the PSYOP. It's a lot of lies and misinformation from law enforcement, FBI, the feds. And they had their reasons for doing it. It's up to us, the public, my friends, to not allow ourselves to be hoodwinked anymore or lied to. Let's get to the truth of this case, right? And spread the truth as best we can. Thanks, everyone. It's Jason. Bye.